The work that I'm showing here in the Draíocht's Worlds of Their Own is titled A Fragment of Things. My work went from painting to a type of expanded painting, so I kind of, whatever was on the canvas or the page kind of pushed out into the three-dimensional space, and I started looking at how one could look at a three-dimensional space like a painting and how one navigates through a space. So I suppose when I'm looking at a gallery space, it becomes this 360-degree painting sometimes, that the composition changes from each viewpoint that the viewer navigates through. That's how my work became a lot more sculptural. Kind of went from painting to installation, and then in the past year or so I've kind of reverted back to working on paper again, and currently I use mixed media collage. The components that make up my work are kind of bound by how they're connected. That's why I think that the work that I install is only like a moment of the lifetime of what the object actually is. I'm inspired by, and I work from my landscape around me, like in the industrial landscape where I live, and the cityscape of Dublin. I kind of take from structures like building sites, and found materials kind of find their way into my work. I suppose it's just like a bringing together of materials that I find or I make. So I think it's not just, I don't just work with found materials. There's diversity to the work that kind of just happens naturally. I think it's about trying to find an intersection between all those things, or finding a balance or a tension between colour, form, negative space and positive space. And I suppose I'm kind of trying to have these things that work independently of each other somehow like come together. My work naturally responds to the title of the show, Worlds of Their Own, because I am kind of creating a world within itself, or a fragment of a world within itself, which kind of relates to this title being a fragment of things. It's a fragment of a wider assemblage. In relation to my three-dimensional practice, I kind of try to link it with the architectural space. So I use quite theatrical lighting, spotlights, to shine on the work and create these interesting shadows that nearly create drawings within the space. So the works behind me are made of PVC coated grid and rope, and they're kind of things that have been in my studio for a while, but they didn't act as the way they are now. It kind of took my physical engagement with them and the manipulation of the material to kind of knock them out of shape, or to pull them a kind of way and distort them. The idea of like columns has come into my work over the past year or so. I see columns as being these connectors between the floor and the ceiling. So this kind of shape that provides height, but also kind of gives the viewer space to navigate around it. So I've connected rope that's been weaved in to contort these shapes and tied them together and kind of fixed them in a space for the duration of the show. So again, this like word connector comes into play, as it does with like how the work is hung on the wall with the bars. All these things and how they're put together is very evident, and I don't try to hide how the work is made. It's in fact pointed out. It's made a focal point of the work, because I think that's where the activation is. I think that's where the energy is stored in its connection. I'm delighted to have been selected as the artist in residence in 2022 for the Draíocht's 21st year. It provides me with an unending amount of support from a community that I live in, and I suppose it's just a very nurturing thing to be welcomed into a space that sees potential in my career and my practice.